You're listening to the Climate Dispatch podcast, presented by Sierra Club California and Angeles chapter, and Stranded Astronaut Productions. Available everywhere you listen to podcasts, we cover the stories of the climate crisis, from celebrating the wins to breaking down our fears, all while sharing collective hopes for the future. Welcome back to Season 2 of the Climate Dispatch podcast. This season, we're expanding to bring you climate stories from across the state of California and connect them to global environmental issues. The climate crisis is already impacting us. We're breaking down how, why, and what we can do about it. I'm Taya Jeanette, and today we're talking about climate migration and the recent rise in dangerous and violent anti-immigration policies, two topics that are deeply interconnected.
Local neighborhood left shaken tonight after ICE agents target street vendors.
Chaotic and confrontational scene when mass federal agents swarm a Home Depot parking lot.
Upending lives and the fragile business community.
Many people concerned about what comes next. Another rally happened over the weekend, pushing back on the federal response.
For our special first episode back, I'm joined by fellow Sierra Club communicator and documentarian Sabrina Claros. We sat down together to discuss the response of Californians to the recent ICE raids. This is where I'm proud to be an Angelino, because we took to the streets fast. So fast. We were out there, neighbors protecting neighbors, community members having their voices heard. And unfortunately, the US government was basically refusing to hear us and is continuing to refuse to hear even the cries of government leaders asking them to get out of LA, asking them to get out of Minnesota. And since last June, we've seen ICE occupations just become worse across the country with two, I'm just going to come out and say it, public executions on the streets of Minneapolis, caught on camera, things that we can see with our own eyes.
These ICE operations are terrifying neighborhoods, tearing apart families, and unjustly targeting communities of color. And while I think most minority and communities of color have already known this for most of our lives, unfortunately, it has to be of the scale to make everybody see it.
But it's no secret that the US's very existence depends on immigrants, whether we're talking about its inception or modern economic context. The US is a country based on immigration, but also on colonization. There's an integrated violence against marginalized communities that continues to permeate our national culture. As the global south continues to be exploited by wealthy, northern, heavily polluting nations, we're actually going to see immigration become a bigger global topic as climate change intensifies extreme weather events. Yet we really haven't had much of a global conversation about how we will plan for this, how we will create a more welcoming world to deal with this issue on a global scale.
Even as more and more people are starting to recognize that the climate crisis has a direct impact on immigration, our global leaders haven't really talked about it in an official format. One of the last big conversations about this was in the 50s and 60s.
The 50s?
Crazy, right? It's a whole generation has gone by since we've actually addressed what the international rules around immigration should look like.
So what did we actually decide in that conversation nearly 70 years ago now?
So in 1951, we had the Refugee Convention and the subsequent 1967 protocol, where a refugee is defined as somebody at threat of persecution and lacking protection from their country. The protocol outlines their right to seek asylum and the international standards of treatment for their protection. And clearly, these standards are outdated. People are migrating due to climate collapse in their home countries and are not afforded the same protections or pathways. There's really no way to declare that kind of emergency on a global scale. I mean, we already saw what the LA fires did last year. The displacement and disruption from environmental disasters is massive. In Central and South America, we're seeing increasing fires in the Amazon because of deforestation. Toxic algae blooms in Mexico from rising sea temperatures are damaging fishing economies. While there is that growing urge and recognition to develop a new category of climate refugees, there's no official declaration of the intersection of climate and migration. People are left in a state of uncertainty, lacking any kind of international protections, and are left to just survive undocumented status and just trying to survive in general. These people are people who have lost their homes, lost their ways of life, having to leave where they grew up, where they were born, their families and their friends. And it's heartbreaking, right? We say it over and over again. People don't leave home because they felt like it. People leave home when they're desperate. But then when it's coming from a place of the climate crisis versus political persecution, there's just nothing to support people in need.
One of the things when we talk about migration, it's often framed as this national security threat issue, and it's often misportrayed as this rhetoric around like it's bad for the economy, bad for the environment, and bad for our well-being.
Isaias Hernandez, a climate educator also known by the moniker Queer Brown Vegan, has been a vocal advocate for seeing the issue of ICE raids and immigration through the lens of climate justice.
As we're witnessing the acceleration of climate disasters increase in the global north, the global south has been experiencing these long devastating effects, whether you look in regions in Somalia or in South Africa or in India and Pakistan. All of these like accelerated climate disasters have been very deeply linked to rapid resource extraction, the loss of biodiversity. So I think when it comes to migration, we have to think about most of the times people are departing their regions of their lands because of safety, because of sense of stability.
How are we seeing the intersection of these migration patterns and the current environment in the US with ICE raids impacting the health and safety of these communities?
When we talk about climate issues, we try to tend to, disconnect the human experiences. And something that I really argue for is that when you systematically are ripping people away from their homes locally, people are the environment. People contribute to their livelihoods. They contribute to that. But two, they're also like depleting a lot of the local economies that are based in immigrant communities, especially in documented communities. It really kind of affects us from that end. But two, like the industries that employ these people are also recognizing that we know that the average American wouldn't work in these industries for that wage. So, I think that when we talk about it from a climate lens, it's such a vast array to be able to approach this issue, which is really great. But I think that where people often get lost is like, well, the amount of emissions to deport people is costing this much in airplane aviation. And it's like immigrants from different countries being just valued as a carbon emission. I think when we talk about it from a climate change lens and the state of the world today is we can take it at various angles. One of the angles that I like to present it to is through the industry side. So when we look at these ICE deportations and these tactics that these ICE agents and institutions are using, is that's closely linked to the border surveillance industry, which is the combination of big tech, military, law enforcement and other industries and biometrics and, big data, things like that. And so when we look at the larger picture of like, okay, well, this is just surveillance capitalism, right? Or the surveillance industry. Who is funding behind that industry? Now, I think from the social side, from what we're seeing right now as ICE, is that I think that we don't know the long-term effects, the chemical weaponry that is being used in a lot of environments towards its citizens.
Isaias makes the point that while we might be able to document the environmental impact of border patrol and military industries, this does little to quantify the deeply human side of the issue. For many, including Isaias, the prevalence of aggressive anti-immigration tactics is personal.
I have loved ones in my extended family who are undocumented. And, I grew up a lot learning stories about ICE and, what it did to my community from externally, but also like internally of people who, were violently assaulted by this institution. And, I think for me as a climate educator, I've always believed that there is truth in education, that yes, we should value intellectualism. It's a very hard time because I think this idea of like in the environmental movement, we're always trying to do good to save the planet, making sure my loved ones don't get deported. Like that's my climate work. So I think that when people are telling us like, how do we get people involved in climate change and do environmental work? well, when's the last time you've been engaged with immigrant rights groups that have been sounding the alarm of these issues into 2010? So I do think that this is a very large opportunity for environmentalists and the environmental movement to start learning from social and racial justice movements, because all of these are linked. The private prisons from the racial justice side, to immigrant rights, to social justice, to now the environment of ICE like really destroying the earth in its own violent ways, and also, targeting activists. I believe that, no one is undocumented in this world. We're all people. We are citizens of the earth. We would really stop trying to portray the rhetoric around how much immigrants bring to the American GDP economy, because our bodies are not just outputs of economic numbers. We're also like ecologies. We are systems of resilience. We're also people who believe in the arts, and they simply do not care about our humanity.
People move where they can. People will settle where their friends and neighbors are if they know anybody who's here in the US. People just kind of settle down where they find space. And as they're finding space, they're moving into places that are very, very different than where they're coming from. These communities, as they come into the city, they're also bringing practices and behavioral frameworks from home that create strong communities and complement urban sustainability efforts. We have labeled this Latino urbanism, but for the communities that live there, it looks like the informal sidewalk mercados. Like, have you ever driven through LA and you see the hanging clothes on fences and people are laying out electronics and home goods?
Of course.
Yeah, right? You see the street vendors with elote, raspados, tacos. You have LA dogs. Like, people are filling in the gaps that their community needs. When you're walking through more residential neighborhoods, you'll see people hanging out on their front yards to greet neighbors. You see more pedestrian-friendly design. You're seeing murals, you're hearing music. There's places that have kind of been recreated into plazas where people can come together to celebrate, whether it's for holidays or for life or just to spend time with the people in your neighborhood.
This is really interesting because last season we talked about this concept of the 15-minute city, this kind of idealized urban environment where you can get to basic necessities like groceries, parks, your work or school, all within a 15-minute bike ride, public transit ride mostly, or walk. And this is sounding very similar to this concept of 15-minute city, which is kind of being put forth as a new idea for urbanization and the pathway forward. But it kind of sounds like this already exists within a lot of Latino and immigrant communities.
Absolutely. It's really kind of bringing the infrastructures for a lot of these Latino immigrants, they're structures from home, where you know your neighbors, where you can get lost in conversation and celebration. It's that porch, sidewalk, and plaza culture that's often sanitized and dampened in urban design. Instead of demolishing and rebuilding neighborhoods, it's another practice in resourcefulness.
Technically, this site was a gas station 100 years ago. Then it became a tailor shop. That tailor shop burned down, and that's when it became just a vacant lot for years.
Sabrina and I had the chance to stop by the Cultiva LA Cesar Chavez Community Garden in Pico Union and talk with Jose Miguel Ruiz, the founder of Cultiva LA. Next to a busy, loud, and car-filled street, there's this oasis of raised beds, growing crops, and even a patch of native grass.
So this is actually one of LA's oldest community gardens. It started in the 80s by a group of parents here at 10th Street Elementary, which actually just completed 100 years. They just celebrated their 100-year anniversary. So it tells you about just a rich history. But it was parents that said, hey, we've had enough. Can we do something where we could take our kids growing up in an urban area like this? And then fast forward, the garden itself had 32 members that just kept calling this their community garden.
Jose Miguel started Cultiva LA with a mission to provide kids in his neighborhood with something he lacked as a kid, a space to gather and exist as a community safely, a place to stay out of trouble, and somewhere to connect with the land. So what was your journey to forming Cultiva LA? Was gardening always an interest for you and something that you knew you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I think I ran away from gardening simply because, I come from a family of farmers. My father used to farm for a living in Mexico. My mom did as well. Fast forward when they came to the US, my dad still worked in the Central Valley picking fruit from the different seasons. So I always saw it as heavy work, work that kept, my dad away, or he would have to travel from Northern California, Central Valley, and there was summers where we wouldn't see him. So I think for me it was very challenging to accept that there was a future in agriculture, because I always saw it as something that it was just physical work that people of color would do. And of course, growing up here, the parents wanting the best for their children, it was always instilled that they wanted better for us. So this better became go to law school, become a doctor. And I did that. I went to UC Santa Cruz. I thought I wanted to do business. I thought I wanted to become a lawyer, until you realize that, hey, there's more. There's agriculture, or urban agriculture, is actually a profession. It's farming, and it's one of the world's oldest professions. So how do we honor that? And I think that's what really that became the shifting point.
Hi, folks. I'd like to take this opportunity to recommend another podcast to you, a show I've been enjoying lately. It's called Cited. Cited is about the politics of science and research. Their new season is called Green Dreams. Each episode tells the story of a utopian thinker and their dreams for our green future. You'll learn about prominent environmental theorists across the ideological spectrum, and some lesser-known figures that operate in the shadows. Should we make these green dreams a reality, or are they actually nightmares? Catch Green Dreams at citedpodcast.com. That's at CITED podcast.com.
If I were to ask my dad, if he is an environmentalist or if he's an environmental steward, he'd probably ask, ¿qué es eso? What is that? But if I were to ask him, is he someone that takes care of the land? Is he someone that really values respecting our earth? He would say, absolutely, claro que sí.
That's Amanda Pantoja, the Urban Greening Program Manager at Green Latinos, an organization that has helped fund community garden initiatives across Los Angeles, including the Cultiva LA Cesar Chavez Garden.
I remember growing up and walking to school and the air smelling really bad, and I didn't know why. I remember just having days where the streets and the air would be full of pollution, and again, I didn't know why. And it was only when I got connected to Communities for a Better Environment that I finally find the reason why, and it was because for years our communities had been neglected and intentionally ignored because we are a Latino community. And that injustice really fueled me to take action. I really think that environmental stewardship and our culture are separate. They go hand in hand. For many Latino communities and families, we grew up with the idea that we have to have a deep relationship with the environment. It's inherent in our families, whether that come from taking care and passing down traditional ways of taking care of our farms and our gardens, honoring our indigenous roots, and also just simply growing up with the idea that we have to take care of what we have. Some of my first experiences with environmental stewardship was seeing my dad. He was composting in our backyard, but he wouldn't call it composting. It was just, we're giving back to the soil. He would gather all of our vegetable scraps and just put it back into the ground. Seeing my family save the Tupperware of butter and using that for beans or salsa, it's something that we do every day. And I think that really merging the culture into the environmental stewardship really brings it into something that's familiar, into something that's not abstract, into something that we feel comfort in. And it really does strengthen our work and our stewardship more when we see ourselves identified in the work. And so I think culture really puts meaning to environmental stewardship. Whether we use the word or not, we're doing it every day and we're passing it down.
Green Latinos is built on the importance of including Latino voices in environmental solutions, empowering a community that's on the front lines of environmental and climate impacts, and one that also has ingrained solutions to climate injustice.
For us, it was really understanding that our communities, whether it be from Central America, South America, we've had to farm for survival. It wasn't an option. It's not like you woke up one day and say, hey, I want to pick up on, the craft, of growing food or, having a garden. We really had to grow to survive. But I think our hope is that even though they're away from home, they find these spaces as a way of being connected to home. It's a way of connecting both worlds. And I think that's super powerful, that you can't measure it, but you hear it, you see it, and they get to do it with other community members that may not be family by blood, but they're now family as a garden.
You kind of feel like family almost. Like it is just like the more we come together in these spaces, the more we get to see each other, and now like are interested in how we're doing and our well-being, and we're always asking about one another. And I think that's what it's all about, is like building those connections so that we are able to take care of one another. Jose Miguel tells me that they're like, oh, like, where's Amanda? Is she coming through? Where is she? How is she? What I love about, this community and just like Latinos in general is like when you show up and just show that you're like a great person, have a good heart, people show up for you in that same way too.
As we were having this interview, neighbors were walking by and waving at Jose Miguel, asking if the garden was open today. He told us he's careful when he puts the tent canopy up, as it becomes a beacon to the neighborhood that something is going down in the garden. Even in our first time visiting the space and meeting Jose Miguel, I felt that kind of connection to a bigger family, a very welcoming environment.
Even when we arrived, right? I mean, Jose offered us a café de olla. He offered us the roscas to start our day.
I remember that you actually found the baby in the rosca, but I haven't received my party invite.
I did. I don't know if I'll be able to do the party planning this time around. I'm still going to go back and take something to thank them for being so welcoming to us. And it's important, this feeling of belonging, especially in a largely immigrant community, right? They didn't just welcome us, they welcome everybody. And these spaces become safety nets.
With ICE, you just didn't know if literally I myself was going to be taken away, if any of our folks who were standing in line for resource were going to be taken away. And quite frankly, this neighborhood has been the playground for a lot of these raids. Just a few blocks away here on 6th Street, it's the Home Depot that we all saw on TV that got raided, I think up to 4 times now. And I keep using the word raided, but there's intentionality with these raids. It's private property. How is a Home Depot allowing this to happen? It's intentional. But with that said, just a few blocks away, although fear is present, community trusts enough for the community garden to respond with care. It makes you analyze the situation in different ways and then get creative with how we respond. We never stop really responding to the need, because the need for food is very real. But I think it also made us realize that these communities, or our community, have always been target of something, whether it be the inequities of climate change, the reality with migration, Guatemala, Central America, these are large diasporas.
Yeah.
And for us to now adapt to this only makes us stronger and more resilient.
Did you see a change at all in the garden attendance or in the overall kind of atmosphere and feeling of your community members coming to this space?
Yes, immediately we did see a decline in participation, because again, folks weren't sure if the site was going to get targeted, because it was such a present and active community area for services that, and anyone wanting to take advantage of that would have said, hey, go to a Cultiva site. They have a lot of activities.
The streets did feel very quiet and lonely, and you could feel this energy of like anxiety and fear. I constantly thought about, my family. My dad has to go out to work, and so I was afraid that he would be, questioned or taken in. I also thought about my brother, who has autism, and if an ICE officer were ever to go up to him, it would be very distressing on him. And so I was constantly just thinking about, like, maybe my family also just needs to stay inside, because what all is happening outside is just extremely traumatic and unsafe for them. And it definitely was not unique to my family. This summer was really bad, and I would say personally, It was hard for me to show up sometimes in work because a lot of the worst ICE raids were in Huntington Park, where I grew up. And so to, show up on my laptop, meanwhile all of this was happening, was so hard. This was just such a blatant attack on our communities. And we're being told by a lot of our members that a lot of their programming and community engagement had to go to a complete halt or had to change because people were just not safe to come outside. To be so fearful of the outdoors is something that I think is interesting to look at. It's like they were making us so scared that we weren't even stepping outside. When we actually do need to be outside. We need to be in our green spaces. We need to be at the parks. We need to be at the state parks, all of these resources because they're important for our health.
We had to have each other accountable, not necessarily just Cultiva. We can't do things alone, but when we work as a collective, we're stronger. And then community saw that when you see a county canopy, when you see a city of LA canopy, they feel safe. They know that someone's gonna have their back if the going gets tough.
During that time, obviously there were just so many violations of rights and people just getting kidnapped on the street left and right. And I think to respond to what was going on, we were we have to prepare communities with the tools to be able to be safe during these times. We are still under threat by the federal government. ICE is still around in some sense, and we are still being told this very dangerous rhetoric around, immigrants being bad and we need to leave, and these things are still constantly impacting our communities. So I think our priority is to make sure that we ensure that these community spaces are safe.
How do you see spaces like this community garden being a resource or a safe haven when the community is being unjustly targeted?
Green spaces are one of the easiest resources for communities to come together. Someone can simply step out of their apartment and come over to the garden and get to meet their neighbors, get to spend time amongst trees and plants. And it is something that is needed during this time. It's just spaces and moments where we can just be, whether that be by ourselves or with others. But, I think when we are inside being bombarded with these horrible news and being too scared to be outside, safe havens like community gardens that are protected are really opportunities for us to just be at peace with ourselves. And I hate to sound corny, but it feels really like a miracle. It's incredible that this place is existing and we're able to talk here on this bench amongst the raised beds that community members grow their food in. Spaces like these are powerful. They're addressing more than just planting trees and plants. They're providing spaces for people to have healthy food, to come together during times where they're seeking community connection. This is a space for health.
As Jose Miguel and Amanda both mentioned, immigrant communities are often at the intersection of injustice. These communities are more likely to experience heavy pollution from nearby highways or warehouses, to lack access to healthy foods, and to be displaced in the event of a disaster or climate event. Severe and cruel anti-immigration policies in the US are only adding to that vulnerability that Latino and immigrant communities are already experiencing.
And on top of that, these ICE occupations are extremely wasteful, where tear gas is being deployed in neighborhoods and on children with canisters left in the street. Cars are left abandoned, and the emissions impact of Border Patrol operations are a huge factor. Our producer Megan told us this morning that her friend is just seeing idling cars everywhere in Minnesota. And instead of implementing policies that uplift and empower communities, these anti-immigration policies are actively hurting communities at every level. And it's up to community members like Jose Miguel who are creating spaces where his neighbors can come together, feel safe, and where that next generation can be inspired. These spaces aren't always easy to maintain, especially when there is such a constant threat looming overhead. And so the fact that there are still people who see the garden as their safe haven, despite it being such a public place, I think really speaks to what he's built.
And we asked him when we were there, how he saw this space would continue to provide that peace, that place to just be, and how it might evolve over time in an ever-changing landscape of Los Angeles.
I think it's just adapting. And I think this is where we also want those same opportunities for our children. We also want to be part of these events. And Cultiva has been part of these events through our spaces. So it's also providing the opportunity to our youth to dream bigger. You know, can they be the future landscape architects to do a partnership agreement with LA Life, with having a garden? And I think that's what this space could provide for years to come, is just the creativity. Remediation is possible. I think a lot of folks run away from it simply because they don't understand the science that goes into it, but it's possible. And we have a lot of pockets of contaminated land in LA County, and I think it's time to face the reality and do something about it.
And it takes buy-in from the community, from government officials, but also, like you said, money, for this not to be a vacant lot or another gas station, but for it to be something that gives back to the community. So I think that's pretty incredible that you were able to, take all of that and be able to turn this into something that is growing and flourishing. I mean, we're here just after a couple of days of rain. I'm seeing flowers, lettuce. What all are you growing here?
Yeah, so you named a lot of those cool things. We have cabbage. We're very intentional growing with the seasons. Right now, we're going through winter. We have a lot of kale, a lot of the legumes that would grow in cold conditions, spinach, Swiss chard. And then as we start getting closer to spring and summer, then we start putting other items that do better, like tomatoes in the summer. But it also allows an opportunity for flowers, the eco and biodiversity of people, but also fauna. You're going to start seeing butterflies, hummingbirds. We've seen them already, bees, and it's all this ecosystem that we're creating for them so that they could survive and help us have better yield on the food as well.
As Jose Miguel starts talking about the butterflies and the hummingbirds, I can't help but think of monarchs. They are the symbol of migration. And amidst everything that's going on, we hear it over and over again. Migration is a human right. Organizations and community members like Jose Miguel and Amanda, Cultiva LA, and Green Latinos are creating opportunities for all immigrants. They're supporting a massive community.
Migration is a natural process and way of life for most or some species. And
for most people. Right?
Yeah.
Cultures over time have migrated, and our political borders are just making it so much harder than it needs to be.
A butterfly does not need a passport.
Nope. And it's so beautiful to see what's being built here through Cultiva LA, through Green Latinos. They really are building the spaces that are needed. The garden exists in a part of the city where design discourages spontaneous interactions with your neighbors. There are no informal gathering spaces. There's a lack of green spaces. It's impacted by layers of pollution. This community garden becomes a haven of connection to people and to the land. And it's built by the people, for the people who have faced forced migration, continuous oppression, and violence. And there's hope because there's community. You can hear it in the voices of the community members we interviewed. We'll end with their voices, the elders who have survived so much and continue to guide us. The ending is in Spanish, and we'll provide translations online.
Nosotros mismos somos de la tierra, de ahí nos formamos, y ahí vamos a ir a dar a la tierra. Yo vengo, pues me crié, me formé de la agricultura. Yo pienso que nuestra responsabilidad como adultos y como personas que traemos un caminar de antes, podemos enseñarle a la nueva generación a muchas cosas que nosotros traemos, cosas como por ejemplo la educación que nos dieron nuestros padres, como este jardín, pues, que podemos enseñarle a los jóvenes, a nuestros nietos, de dónde viene la fruta, de dónde vienen las verduras.
Mire qué lindo este romero. Ayer fui a la iglesia y no hallaba cómo acomodarme las uñas porque de aquí me fui a la iglesia donde estuvimos sembrando. Pero a mí me ayuda eso, el asunto del jardín, porque yo crecí en un rancho y se sembraba todo esto y papá le gustaba andar sembrando y yo atrás de él sembrando cositas y esto me reanima. Y viene uno aquí a llevarse una hojita de algo que se lleve y uno es feliz. Y es una bendición y yo considero que todo lo que tenemos en un jardín es regalo de Dios. Y si lo cultivamos, lo cuidamos, lo amamos, cosechamos, sembramos, eso también es parte de la vida y una vida sana, bonita, tranquilo.
The translations of what you just heard can be found at sc.org/climate dispatch. That's sc.org/climate dispatch. Thanks for listening to the Climate Dispatch podcast. Now, Zena Carlota with Debajo del Mar.
Debajo del mar, una mujer duerme y anda. Con sueños pasados cantan peces en su cabello. Cuerpo de sal, su piel de caracoles, le ofrecí mis rojas flores al pie de sus orillas. Llama, canta, mis ancestros no me dejan, siempre están conmigo, conmigo, conmigo. Llama, mis ancestros no me dejan, siempre están conmigo. Cuerpo de sal, su piel de caracoles, le ofrecí mis rojas flores al pie de sus orillas. Llama, canta, mis ancestros no me dejan, siempre están conmigo, conmigo, conmigo. Llama, mis abuelos no me dejan, siempre están conmigo. Debajo del mar, una mujer duerme y anda, con sueños pasados cantan peces en su cabello.
Hi, it's Megan from the Sierra Club Angeles chapter. If this episode moved you, I'm here to invite you to turn that energy into action. To stand with immigrant communities and protect dignity, safety, and opportunity for all, we encourage you to support the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, better known as CHIRLA, CHIRLA. Visit www.chirla.org and make a donation to support the vital community organizing they do. Want to do even more? You can support our environmental and social justice work at sierraclub.org/California with a donation today. Every win for climate and justice starts with community. Join ours at sierraclub.org/California.
The Climate Dispatch is a podcast by Stranded Astronaut Productions and Sierra Club California and Angeles chapter, produced by myself, Taya Jeanette, and Megan Spatz, with research producer Sabrina Claros, audio engineering and editing by Maxfield Biggs, and original theme music and score by Phil Hamilton. This episode sourced news clips from KTLA 5, NBC LA, and Fox 11 Los Angeles.